welcome back to another Learn Unity tutorial. In this video, we are going to take a look at how to create animated explosions to make this game a lot more interesting. So let's get started. Now the first thing you're going to need is some sort of an animation for your explosion. I've just created this simple one here in Photoshop, and it's a 3-frame animation that explodes. We're going to want to import those graphics into Unity. So I'm just going to do that by opening up my Finder here and dragging and dropping my 3 graphics down into my Assets folder. Now at this point, my Assets folder is starting to get a little bit busy, and I really recommend organizing it by creating some folders. So I'm just going to do that quickly by right-clicking, going to Create, Folder, and I'm going to make one for sprites. And then I'm just going to drag and drop my sprites into that folder. Similarly, I'm just going to create a folder for my scripts as well. This way, as my project gets more complex, I will be able to find everything because it'll be right where I need it to be. So now that we've imported our sprites, first of all, you want to make sure that they are properly set up for Unity. Remember, we can do this quickly by clicking on the first one, holding down the Shift key, and then clicking the last. I'm just going to set my pixels per unit to match the way my project's set up, which is 32. I'm going to choose no filter and change my format to 32-bit. I'll now hit apply. And those graphics are good to go. So the first thing we're going to do to create an explosion is make a new game object. I'm actually going to create an empty game object. I'll call this one explosion. And for now, it's just an empty nothing floating around in our screen, and we're going to want to add an animation to that. So you can go up to click on Window, and down here in Animation, we're going to open the Animation window. I actually like to dock mine just at the bottom of my scene view here. And what I want to do is, while you are on the explosion game object, hit Create, and we will create an animation for it. I'm going to call this one Explosion. And now what we can do is quite simply grab our animations and one by one drag them up into our scene. There's my first frame. I like to put my second one at about 0.1 on the keyframes, and then the next one at 0.2. Now, an important fact when you are creating an animation is right now, as I scroll through, it will do 10 frames of this small one, 10 frames of the medium one, and exactly 1 frame of this, and then it will shoot back to the other. So it really won't play this one at all the way this is currently set up. So I'm just going to click that one. I'm just going to copy and paste it on there so that now each frame runs for a full, or each animation runs for 10 frames before it resets. Now, one other important thing, you can hit play here to see what your animation looks like. You can zoom in on it. It's looking all right. I'll stop that now. But one thing is, we don't want our animation to loop when we create the game and to run over and over again. We just want it to run once. So down in your project window, if you click on the explosion animation, there's a little button here called loop time, and just by unclicking it, you'll make it so that the animation does not loop. All right, now that I'm sort of done with this animation window, I'm actually just going to dock it down here so it's out of the way. Now for the moment, we have this rather annoying explosion sitting in our screen, and we don't want it there at the start. We only want it to appear when we destroy a ship. So we're going to do something brand new here, and that's we're going to create a prefab of this explosion. Now prefab is just a stored version of it that can be spawned into your game whenever you want it to. So to do that, I'm simply going to click on my explosion and drag it down here into my project window. You'll notice now that the explosion looks a little different. It's got a cube, and also my explosion that's in the game is now blue. That means it's a prefab, which means I can spawn in different copies of it wherever and whenever I want, but they'll all have all the same characteristics. I'm actually going to delete this one out of my game as I don't want an explosion to happen as soon as I start the game. And while it will now disappear from my scene, I still have the prefab, which I'll be able to spawn in each time I destroy a ship. Now we're going to be doing just a little bit of code. You can go back to your assets, into your scripts folder, and we're going to actually be doing this through our destroy script. Now good news is this is actually a pretty simple script. We just have 2 lines that we're going to run here. So first I'll come under my class and we're going to create a new variable, and this one's just going to be so that when we destroy a ship, it knows which prefab it's supposed to spawn in. So to do that, we're going to type in public. It's going to be a game object. specifically the explosion game object we just created. And I'm going to call this one explosion prefab. So now we'll be able to drag and drop our explosion prefab into here so that this script knows what it's supposed to spawn. Now we just need to actually spawn it. So we'll come down here to where our mouse down destroys the object, and right after we score our point, but before the object gets destroyed, we want to spawn this animation. Now, in Unity, it doesn't actually use the word spawn. We're going to be using a different one called instantiate. And we'll put a bracket after it, and it's going to need to have 3 different values here. First of all, it needs to know, well, what is it instantiating? And in our case, that's going to be our explosion prefab. So we can write that in. We'll then do a comma. And after this, now it needs to know where we want to actually spawn this in. And we want it to spawn in wherever the ship is. So we want it to look at the ship's transform component in Unity and look at its position, and that's where it will spawn it. We can now put another comma. Finally, it wants to know how we want to rotate this prefab, if we want it to just be straight up or if we want it to turn a little bit. And for now, we're just going to use the same rotation that the ship already has because the explosion doesn't need to be rotated any special way. So we'll have it look again at the ship's transform and specifically at its rotation, and it'll just borrow those. We can then put a semicolon, save this, and we're now all set. After we press mouse down on a ship, we'll get a point. It will then instantiate our prefab at the position of the ship using its rotation as well. All right, so now when you get into Unity, you can click on your ships or fruit or whatever it is you have falling from the sky. And you've got a new box here now, just wanting to know what the explosion prefab is going to be. So we can simply grab that prefab and drag it into the box. And you want to do that for each of your ships. At this point, you can start up your game. And you'll find that the explosions are more or less working. My points are totaling up. But we have this funny effect where the explosions just stay on the screen all the time, which is definitely not what you want. Now to fix that, what we're going to want to do is actually take a look at our explosion prefab, and we want to get into our animation window specifically. So I'm actually just going to drag my explosion back up here into my game. Click on my animation window, and what's essentially happening right now is our explosion is playing and then it's staying on the last frame, which at the moment, my final frame is this one. So we want to make sure that our last frame is actually an empty frame that has nothing in it. So I'm just going to click on a frame after this one is all done. And we want to add a new property. This one is going to be in our sprite renderer. Remember, the sprite renderer is just what makes a sprite appear. And essentially what we want to do is disable the sprite renderer so that after the animation plays, it turns itself off. So I'm going to click on enabled here. Now at this point, you'll notice it right here. We've got the enabled, and actually I'm just going to click it off because we don't want to enable it. We want to disable it. So now at the start of the scene, everything will be playing. Our animation will look great. It'll get large and then disappear at the end. Now, just to make sure that that is applied to everything over here in my inspector where it says overrides, I just want to hit apply to all. That way it'll make sure that all copies of this prefab get that change we just did. I can now take the explosion out of my scene, and we can test this one. All right, and now when we play the game, we have the ability to destroy multiple ships. As you can see, I'm not very good at my own game, but the explosions come in and then disappear nicely. All right, go ahead and give this one a try for yourself.